Okay. All right. Numbers are stacking up. So let us begin. This will be recorded as always. So for folks that perhaps need to step out for a moment, you'll be able to come back and consume as we'll send you an email after the fact with the recording here, as well as hopefully you have an introduction here to a really solid contact in this space. I just based on the looks, I can see that we have some consultants that operate in higher education. We have a number of folks that are in, operators in higher education. So this should be a really relevant session today. Quick introduction to myself. I'm Rick Palea. I lead the customer organization here at SmartSuite, and have the joy today of introducing Dave Zovak from Georgetown University, who is here to tell his story. He's been almost a year now in SmartSuite, is it, Dave? Quite some
Yeah,
time.
probably about 18 months. About 18 months. Yeah.
Yeah. So an early adopter, an early supporter, someone who's pushed us on the product roadmap as well, which we always love and happy to share feedback along the way. So questions, we do have the Q&A section. We'd love for people to make this very interactive, as Dave has a certain amount that he'll be showing visually today, but we want to supplement that. We want this to just be an open dialogue, open conversation throughout. So fair to say all questions are game here. And then as folks continue to come in, love to hear where you're from, just any general commentary. And if anyone's ever joined a webinar with me before, I'm a big fan of Zoom reactions. So if we want to get those reactions warmed up down there at the bottom. So in your bottom bar, you'll see the little smiley face with the plus. There we go. Got some hearts. Let's get those reactions going, get them warmed up. You'll be using them often with Dave. Perfect. Thanks all.
One
Okay, with
reaction
that.
or another. Yeah.
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 Exactly.
Well, thanks, Rick. Thanks for the opportunity to share. My name is Dave Zovak, and I am a career coach here at Georgetown University, which is actually a collection of colleges. It's not just one, it's one entity, but lots of sub-pieces. And I work as part of the School of Foreign Service, working with grad students and alumni. I'll say a little bit more about that context in a few moments. But my background is in coaching, education, leadership, training and consulting, community builder, technophile, which is part of what drew me to this area, and a learner, which has also been a key part of this process. And I think I've served in a variety of roles vocationally, but the common element has been that I'm a fairly systems shrewd strategic catalyst. So that means I'm not good at maintaining the status quo, but I love coming in and seeing how things could be better and how we might be able to find a way to make them better, even given constraints of size, resources, politics, etc. So that's a little bit of who I am. And before I go further, I also want to say I'm a big fan of a lot of these webinars and use case testimonies and whatnot. And the one from a few weeks ago from UCLA, I thought that on higher ed was really good. His experience, the speaker's experience, similar, probably a bigger scope. I'm giving the perspective more from a single center in a larger institution rather than something that is crossing the whole system with the authority and the responsibilities of that. We're a little piece of the larger institution, but we've got vision for larger influence, and the uniqueness of our role of working with students and faculty to some degree gives us a highly catalytic potential. So anyways, so just a shout out to some of the other webinars on higher ed and SmartSuite. And I think that was a really good one to also get some additional input. So back to my context. So Georgetown University is a historic and beautiful campus, an institution that's just in Washington, D.C. It's the oldest Jesuit and Catholic university in the U.S. Serves undergrads and grads. My particular niche is with the grad and alumni in the School of Foreign Service. And what we do as an office is we provide one-on-one coaching, workshops, networking, and other events and seminars using in-person, virtual, and hybrid formats. And we're a team of about 10. And we partner with a lot of other parts of campus, but that core 10 is really the main group that, as I'm telling stories and talking about working as a team, that's the primary group that have been journeying through the SmartSuite story together. So again, a little bit as I mentioned, rather than this being a deep dive into the technical underpinnings and all the automations and whatnot that we have operating in our system, there's other webinars that can do that better. I'm more than happy to talk with people outside of the time about some of the specifics. I've got some snapshots and I'll speak to some of that, but I really wanted to use my time to more talk about the process of learning, what were the needs that led us to SmartSuite, how that's been useful, useful plus, and what the learning process has been, both in terms of the technology, but also in terms of the integration with our coworkers and making a case for why investing the time and the energy and the resources in this platform is worth it. And so part of this story, obviously it's our story and there are going to be unique things to my situation that won't be relevant to you, but I actually was thinking, I want to make this valuable to you all, those that are tuning in. And I think there's relevancy for if you work on a team, if you have limited resources, and if you're in higher ed, in most cases, that would qualify. Even if you're not in higher ed, there's often realities of limited resources. If you have limited authority, so if you're not in charge of everything, it can just dictate what you'll do going forward. Our story is very much a case of trying to fly under the radar, make sure we're in compliance with the critical things, but just trying to move forward and gain some momentum and some success, knowing that that is the best way to garner further support and further permissions. If you prefer customized tools rather than just something off the shelf, or if you're in knowledge work or service work, all those elements we found to be particularly well suited to SmartSuite as a tool and as a platform for us to keep working and developing our workflows, our data processing, and just discovering new opportunities. So what was our starting point? So our starting point is, again, pretty common for many of you, is we have some data needs. The nature of our work, as I mentioned before, is we each have our own roles, but there's a fair amount of projects that are multiple people, multiple staff intensive. And prior to 2 years ago, there really wasn't a process, certainly nothing formalized in terms of software or even drawn out platforms, but just it used to be just opening the door and finding who else could be, who was around and whatnot. So we had team project needs. We work with a fair amount of data and student data management. And as a university, there's actually multiple platforms at work on the university. And even though we're one of the oldest universities around, had plenty of time, you think, to work out some of the kinks, we still have a wild west of competing platforms, different schools, different departments, and they certainly don't all talk to each other. And even if they have the capabilities, sometimes the gatekeepers between them don't allow for free flow of information. So we've got student data, alumni data, employer data. So as a career center, we're interacting with students, with alumni, and then also employers, companies, and contacts at those places, some of which are recruiters, some of which are alumni. So we're needing to keep track of all that stuff. And we also recognize that, this was what I've just listed are the core essentials of the data work that we need to keep track of. But there's room for a lot more in terms of just, standard operating procedures and other just pieces of data that historically have just floated on loose files somewhere in the Google Drive. Now, again, some of our contextual realities that I've sort of alluded to before, and this will probably be relevant for many of you. Limited budget. We had some budget, and we were we were sort of a reboot of a team post-COVID. This center has been around for a long time, but over a course of a year, sort of the last year of COVID, the team went through nearly an entire reformation. I was in the early stage of the second wave, or the new wave of folks, and so there was definitely a context of openness to doing things new because there weren't people that were championing or maintaining. We always have done it this way, so we have to keep doing it this way. So there was a freshness of opportunity, but still a limited budget. As I mentioned before, there's university-wide data silos. So it wasn't a matter. I mean, some of my first questions when we came into the role was, well, what's the university already using for some of this stuff? How do we find out information about alumni? How do we find out information about students? And there were some windows into limited data that we still have. And I'll say a little bit more about that, but still a lot of data siloing. And really the first 6 to 9 months at a personal level, I just kept running into, this is crazy how we're being hindered in doing our job by not being able to quickly access simple information that we have authority to access, but just the barriers to getting it easily were just a real hassle in terms of contact information for students or alumni or things like that. Other contextual reality is just high level bureaucracy, meaning things were slow. We have a great IT department and university wide and large resources are well provided for, but trying to get center support for particular new things was just really a low priority. And not that it would never happen, but we could graduate 2 years of students before we saw the kind of changes we were interested in trying to develop. So that was a reality we had to work with. And even though while we had a certain freedom to start fresh as a team, it wasn't though that we could, as a center, could just stop doing what was expected of us and take time to figure it out and build it together. It was very much a retooling as we maintained the primary responsibilities of meeting with students, running some programs, bringing in employers, et cetera. So our journey very much was our change journey with regards to data systems was very much in the cracks of our responsibilities, and particularly while we were lower staffed and all of us were doing extra work. It meant we couldn't have the luxury of just stopping and working till we figured it out and then implementing it nice and smoothly. We had to figure out how to do it while we continued to do our responsibilities. And the other great contextual reality is got a sharp team and colleagues that we work with who are willing to learn. And although I do put an asterisk in that, while people are willing to learn, not everyone shares the same sort of just enjoyment of tinkering with software as a hobby that I possess. But there's a willingness to learn, but they want to, most of my colleagues are, show me how I can do my job better rather than, oh, isn't that interesting? Look what that software can do. It's like, well, tell me how that new feature you've discovered can be useful. Then I'll wade into it with you. So again, I had to recognize that not everyone's enthusiasm about learning new software was as deeply embedded in their hearts as it is for me. But there definitely has been a willingness to, let's give it a go if it'll help us serve our students and alumni better. So yeah, I suspect some of what I'm sharing is similar for the others of you in higher ed, as well as probably other small to medium-sized businesses, organizations, not-for-profits, because I've worked in all those different capacities, and these dynamics are very common, at least been my experience. So, I do want to talk some about the specifics. I know sometimes people don't mention other brands. I'm confident SmartSuite isn't afraid of logos from other entities because I'm here at SmartSuite. The end of the story is I think SmartSuite is awesome. So you know where I've landed. So any of the dating I did before the marriage, don't worry about. Don't be threatened by. So the tool set that we inherited was we're a campus that's Google Workspace. So that's kind of a given from our email to our storage. We have some other things, but that's really the primary one. As a center, a lot of our data was either in kind of free-flowing shared Google documents, or Google Sheets, particularly the rosters of alumni and other things like that. And even that was a collection of different sheets or tabs without it being any sort of shared or integrated collection of all the data. And there was only one person on the team. The employee relations person was the only one that had access to that information, not because they were trying to be possessive, but just kind of the nature of who it was shared with and where it was stored and how to find it. So it was more data restriction by accident or by friction of tools rather than purposely trying to limit access from teammates. So, and then Handshake, which for those of you in higher ed, that'll probably be familiar. It's one of the tools that is popular in universities for helping link students with the career centers and potential employers, events, job postings, internship postings, et cetera. And so that was a given. And that continues. So our first foray into exploring other tools that could complement what we were doing. So again, we had to keep the core ones, but some of our first attempts were promoted by some temporary interim leadership. I shouldn't say temporary, but interim leadership that was great and had some familiarity with particular tools like Slack and Asana, and I'd had some experience with both, and Airtable. And as you can see, though, began to realize the primary needs that we were trying to improve from what we had before was project management. How could we work together on those shared projects? Not everything that each person did had to be in Asana or in a project manager, but how could at least the ones that we work together with we could be more organized by? And we started with Asana because you could start at a certain level for free and see where that went. And then Airtable seemed to be a step forward from Google Sheets in terms of some being a bit more database-like rather than just a pure spreadsheet. And so we gave that a shot. And I had some experience with some simple things in that, and so was willing to wade into that. And then Slack was just, again, another popular tool that enabled us, as we were still a hybrid team, gave us a platform to communicate with each other. And so each of these, served a function. They helped us try out some things and pilot ways of working together better. But we soon recognized that we were getting a platform. Even myself, who loves technology, I was even getting a little bit of platform fatigue of like, oh, which platform do I need to go to do this task or this information or whatever. Our interim leader, who was also a driver in technology, he left, and so the gas pedal let back in terms of promoting some of these particular things. And then I began to, as the person who probably had the most interest on the team, not because it was my job responsibility, but just because I knew we could do better and I knew there was better options out there. I became the de facto promoter of maybe we can do something different. And that led us to, where we are now, which is we're still a Google workspace environment, and there's a lot of good that we leverage from that. Handshake is still a primary tool, and that does some things that it can do uniquely, and it interfaces with other systems and workflows that are essential. So for the foreseeable future, we'll continue to be plugged in that. But SmartSuite has taken the place of Asana, Airtable, even Slack to some degree, although we've shifted over to Google Chat as part of what Slack was doing for us, and then the comments within SmartSuite has also been a way that's captured some of what we were doing in Slack. And really the way it got oriented to it was I was looking on YouTube at some different videos about how to learn Airtable better. And all of a sudden some of the people I like to watch started mentioning this product called SmartSuite. And so I went to the website, started looking, and quickly became attracted to it, partly because I like the new thing and know that organizations and the early stages of their life cycle tend to move fast, be open to responsiveness, and can be an exciting thing to be a part of. So since I recognized that I wanted to up my professional skill set in some of this no code, low code platform development, that there's a number of things out there. And I thought, hey, SmartSuite looks like it ticks a lot of the boxes. My initial impressions are good. And particularly on the website, and I'll probably say more about this soon, is that the help resources were and are amazing. There are just so many ways to learn and get answers to what you want to do, from templates to videos to step-by-step things. And then well, I'm getting ahead of myself, but that was definitely something that was a selling point for me and drew me in. And as as I did a quick back of the envelope type of budgeting based on, because we did actually start paying for a tier in Asana, and we were paying for Slack, and we hadn't started paying for Airtable yet. But by comparing what we were paying there and comparing what we could do in SmartSuite at the intermediate level, we're not even at the advanced level, we could do more and pay less than the collective what we were paying before. And so that was obviously a green light for the director and other team members to say, hey, let's give this a shot. One other little comment too is that the university setting, and we had this conversation a bit when we were looking at Airtable and Asana and Slack, was again that data sensitivity and protectiveness, understandably so, by the IT departments, of what has to get cleared before you can actually use it in a university. And the webinar from the UCLA perspective, they talked about a multiple months process that SmartSuite needed to be approved to be used at a deeper level of intersection with more proprietary data and whatnot. The positive for us, at least initially, has been that we didn't want to do anything with SmartSuite that we couldn't already do with Google spreadsheets or other things like that. So we felt like it was just an additional layer of technology versus something that's getting embedded into potentially fragile and proprietary systems. And so we found out enough that was probably okay, and just stopped pushing. I thought, okay, probably okay, it's probably is good enough. I know we're going to use it for for good, and we're not getting in the guts of any other information at this point. So let's run with it. So we think that's okay, was good enough for us to kind of move forward. And again, figuring that the more success we could show, the more openness there would be to deeper integration if that was needed and when that was needed. So began to think about, all right, if we're making this transition, what are some of the first things that we need to do? And the first we need to recognize is for our team needed to replace Asana and show how SmartSuite was as good, if not better. And so some of the elements that went into my thinking, and at this point it became more and more clear I was a semi-official champion of the technology change, but still just kind of a side part of my job. But some of what I recognize, and from my own experience being on teams and consulting and coaching, is knowing that we need to build credibility for Asana, need to, or for SmartSuite from switching from Asana, that part, we needed to be able to recreate the project workflows that people had learned and saw value in Asana. That was probably the thing that was people most saw. Okay, this is good. This is helping us be systematic and organized. We also set up some automations with some forms and whatnot for event creation. We run a lot of events, and there's a lot of repetitious tasks, although delegated to different people. And so having templates or in SmartSuite language, having automations and default settings on some new things was important to recreate some of the automation that we had in Asana. Now, some of the new things were, and this was part of what drew us to SmartSuite, was that we can now integrate data from other things. And so the information we dealt with in real life wasn't just event information or workflow things, but it was also interfacing with students, alumni, employers. And Asana's, I thought, was good at project management, but it wasn't very good at data management or even databases, where that's the heart of what SmartSuite is. So now we could both do workflow work, and we could in project management, and we could, within the same platform, pull data from other applications when needed, and to thereby minimize repetition of work and having different versions of someone's contact information or whatever. We could standardize and limit the number of data sets that overlapped and weren't always up to date or accurate. So that was some of what was exciting. And also, to be perfectly honest, as someone who spends a lot of time in front of computers, the look and feel of SmartSuite was a selling point for me. I like the colors. I like the just the style of it. A lot of personality. And I actually do think having an environment that you find energizing and positive and delightful helps. I think it's a asset for engagement and productivity, not just an aesthetic thing. And SmartSuite has that really well, from my opinion. So this replacing Asana, that was the first task we knew we wanted to do, and sort of started jumping in to try and do that. Now, again, I already alluded to this before. So I was confident from what I knew about SmartSuite that I could recreate it, but I didn't necessarily want to start from scratch. And so that's when I started going deeper with the resources that SmartSuite has. And so everything from templates, which is probably the first place I really went to, because that was a way that I could get a big picture idea of how had other people solved similar problems. I knew I wasn't creating the wheel from scratch. So what did other people do? And none of them were exactly what I wanted, but there were a few different examples that were close enough, and it began to fill in my understanding of how to do that. So the templates were a great resource. But then also I saw there were guides and demos, and I even was like, well, what's the difference between a demo video and an academy and a guide and community? And in one sense, it didn't really matter, because I just would go to them all when I had a good enough question. And usually just from the repository of resources that was self-servable, 90% of the time I could get what I was looking for just with that. And I've got a curious mind, and so that's pretty impressive to be able to say that. Then also down in the corner, I've got the little chat icon. That is also something I've been really impressed with in terms of my experience with SmartSuite support team, is when I couldn't find something, the responsiveness and the friendliness of the people I was interacting with when I had real life questions was just really, it was encouraging. It reminded me I'm dealing with real people, not just some entity or whatever. And the team's not so big that you see a lot of the same, like a lot of people are actually answering your questions, or they're the ones showing up on videos. And I actually found like I was beginning to feel like I'm getting to know these people at a personal level, or not really, but it felt like there's at least a familiarity that made it easier to continue to ask for help. And I will again make a point that I wasn't like a huge our contract with SmartSuite is not a big money one. We're still on a fairly small, probably a small client for SmartSuite, but I've never felt like a third class client. I've always felt like first class client, and that may not be everyone's experience every time, but I can say for me that's been a real bonus in terms of just being able to be helped in those ways. And so not only has there been direct responsiveness, but again, I just feel like the number of things they make available online, as well as in the last few months, they've had even team-led tutorials and certifications and all that sort of stuff. And I've tapped into those in live whenever I can, or many of the times after the fact, because I schedule wise or whatever. But those have been really catalytic for my learning, and I think that's been that's been an important part, as I'll say more about some of my learning experience. So let me give one snapshot of one of this is like the Asana substitute that we created, and that's a solution called Team Projects, and it's got three applications. It really started off at just one, and then two, which is projects, and within that project you open up a standard record, and we'll look at that in a second, but not that complex. But still, the layout of a record have found that to be very user friendly to tech people, and even people who aren't super tech people. You click on it, it opens up, and you can kind of see what it's looking for. It's visually appealing. It makes sense. Even with no automations or whatever, just the layout of a record allows my team to be able to get pretty much whatever they're looking for very easily. We recognize from our own experience that there's this second app that we created, which is we call it creatively big subtasks, which was there were times where a project may be big enough that just the checklist of to-dos felt like either that list was getting too long, or it didn't provide enough space for some of the complexity or handing off sub projects. And so we just created another app that is, we don't think of them as their projects by themselves, so they're sub projects, but they're broken out from the main projects list. So again, they're giving more room for the people working on those projects to be able to break it out and add more detail and track it as a piece without it totally cluttering up the first one. And then we also have, and this came later in the process, student worker projects, because we have part-time student workers, and they often weren't involved in the big team projects, but they had either parts, or there were smaller tasks from the beginning, recognized, hey, this would be something that'd be great for our student workers to do. And again, rather than totally adding more noise to the project, the main project list, we created a similar one that has integrations as needed to some of the other pieces, but it also allows a really simple way of letting our student workers stay focused in their area, and vice versa. So what started off as one became a sub app, and then a parallel app. And that's worked for us so far. We may refine it down the road, but that's been pretty good so far. All right, so let me go on to the next. All right, so I mentioned we love the project view, and so this is a glimpse into one of our projects, and it's more than one, fits on one screen. So the first view, again, some of the stuff I was saying. I've got the simple information. The data is easily visible. The layout is easy to configure and can rearrange. No matter when you thought of it, you can always add, oh wait, we need this field too, and we can put it back up where it makes sense in the record. So just the layout of a record, I think is a really useful tool. It's easy to change, and yet it really can make usability differences, and help people visually just track what they need to fill out and who's involved, et cetera. So the way we designed it and the records we selected were based some of what we had used before. Some it's morphed over time. We probably were overkill on some of our data, because sometimes people want to link it to something which makes sense, and other times people just want to write down just a note and they don't care if it's linked or whatever. And so we've got containers for that, and under description is just kind of a smart doc where free flowing or context independent information is stored, but then we have links and lookups to team configurations and other data that makes sense for it to be linked, rather than type in fresh every time who's responsible, etc. So that's the top view. And then if you continue on, as I mentioned before, we've got the standard task list, which in this case is empty starting. And I think probably 80% of our projects, that's all they need. But I opened up the links section just to show that they're also, again, from building out, we recognize, hey, there could be value in not only linking to subtasks and student workers, but how can we, our projects should have some connection to our goals, and they should show up in our notes at different times. So while we're not using the goals and team, or not we're using teams, but some of the goals and some of the other elements as much as we can, the fact that we can do it and have a placeholder for it, so when we get further along in our development, we won't have to rebuild something, because we know conceptually our projects that we're working on should relate to our team annual objectives and goals. And so why not have a link between those things? And then here's the data schema kind of view. And if you look, the dark blue is the basic one. It's the projects linked to the subtask project app, and then also the student worker projects is a similar app. And then again, we've got some meeting. Section 3 are meeting and agenda notes, and then Section 2 are goals and teams, other integrations with other aspects of our larger platform. So I realize I'm going long, so I'm going to speed up here a little bit so there's time for questions. So the second thing, so project management was goal 1. Goal number 2 was move from using sheets for lists and our collections of data to databases. And so we definitely, that was again why we were attracted to SmartSuite. And so we've followed a parallel, not identical, but similar data tracking and data integration for our work with alumni as well as employers. We were originally wondering if we should put it all together, just like contacts, but we actually found there was enough differences between them that at this point we decided let's try and have them separate and linked, but 2 different pools of data. It meant we could be better organized, databases compared to spreadsheets, creating reports and finding and just working with the data is so much easier, I think, particularly with all the tools that SmartSuite provides in terms of filtering, finding, ordering, sorting, etc. And the benefits, we had access for all the staff. Now that the employer information now was in our shared workspace, so that anyone could access it. Now, again, we still have some internal, responsibilities, who's ultimately responsible for that data set, and who can access it. But we work together enough that having access actually means everyone wins, as long as we are data responsible. And then we could also now start to automate input, both on our side as well as using forms. And as we reach out to alumni or even employers, we can now give them, we can send them forms, which will ensure a consistency of what we collect as well as an automation of that. So that saves us a lot of time and energy. And we've got some plans for, continuing to send out waves of requests so we can enrich our data through form mailings. We have some other ideas that, and then we'll come to that. So, and we also started laying the groundwork for some of the benefits of sort of big data analysis. So some examples are working with alumni. If we could, LinkedIn currently is a tool that we use to track people's work trajectory. It would be great if we could have that same information or even more in our system so that we could say not only where are our alumni currently working, if we could have a collection of the jobs that they had, particularly when they first graduated from our programs, what was the salary, what were some of the details about the job, that would actually give us some added value insight that LinkedIn couldn't offer, or other things that we could gather. But we can't provide that if we don't have the data, and we can't get the data unless we have containers and a way to organize it. And so that's some of what we've done some thinking about to try and lay the groundwork, create some of the systems, and now we're finding different strategies to try and enrich the containers for data with actual useful data. So, and this is a whiteboard version of some of the thinking for one element of the SmartSuite journey in terms of we've got, for the employers. So we've got companies over on the far right. They're linked to jobs. We wanted jobs to be its own data set, and jobs would be related to we're interested in the jobs that alumni are connected to. Not every job that company offers, but the ones our alumni are connected to. So jobs would be connected to alumni and as well as companies. And there's a little extra complexity here that I won't go into too much, but just because of numbers, we and the plan we're on right now, which I hope to graduate from, we need to break out more recent alumni and older alumni. The active ones are the ones that we mostly deal with anyways, but that's why we got two piles of alumni. But then we also run events, and we want to keep track of that, which is over on the far left. And then we also, looking at some of the other models that we've seen out there, we entertained just using like the description list for tracking conversations, but we thought there's enough flow with people that we're not necessarily capturing everything, but any kind of critical interaction we're having with a student or an employer is its own record. And then that's linked to the company and the staff person with the information. So that way we could always find information or follow a conversation regardless of who had it, if we're storing it in a shared container. All right, I'm gonna keep flying ahead. So this is, again, it's similar to the layout, employers, jobs, and then interactions were all there. All right, I am going to speed up here. So we also had some bonus developments. Those were the two things we've invested with them. We've made significant progress. It's not perfectly polished, but it's very usable, and we're seeing some benefits from it already. Along the way, we've recognized SmartSuite. Hey, that's a great tool and container for staff profiles and in-house information. We have our full-time staff, and there's some contract staff and student workers, and being able to have their stuff information in SmartSuite solution. It's been great. We've been starting to create a library of standard operating procedures, which again used to float around loosely. Now we've got one spot for it, and it's regularly building it out. Then we've got we looked at one of the templates on team goals and individual annual goals, and the asterisks are ones that we're starting to play with. We're piloting them internally. We've created a job hunting toolkit, thinking if we could get every student, even the free level SmartSuite account, what could we provide them that would allow them to have an integrated way to approach job hunting, from keeping track of jobs that they find, people they're meeting, interviews that they're having, et cetera. So we've created something like that. And then we also just found other in-house data, things like tracking internships and fellowships, which are important for our work and are constantly changing, to have a place that we can update and grow that database, among others. All right, so quick, I'm gonna just list these pretty quick. Oh, sorry, let me try them again. Yeah, big picture lessons. So, really big picture, the global law of biology: adapt, migrate, or die. Our workplace continues to change. Our students are facing that, our coworkers are facing that, and our option is either adapt, move on to someplace else, or die. And that's kind of direct and harsh, but I actually think it can be fun but standing still is not really an option. Understanding your context, that's been something that's been really helpful for us. Again, what were we allowed to do? What resources could we harness? Understanding that. And the more we could say, all right, I understand the concerns. The IT doesn't want what we're doing to somehow mess with their data. Okay, we got that. There's a lot we can still move forward, rather than have to wait until it goes through an approval process, knowing that, hey, we're not going to mess with their data. And then kind of strategy: fly under the radar when possible. So anticipate resistance is something that we've learned along the way. And that's in part with people that can be directly with people who either are attached to a way of doing things, or just don't want to bother learning the new things. So be prepared for that, but don't be shut down by that. And then radiate positivity. That goes a long way of winning the day, and at least getting people curious and open to see what you're excited about. All right, some of the systems lessons we've been learning along the way. Mapping it out, not just the data schema dashboard has been great for kind of after the effect, but in terms of, like I showed you the whiteboard slide, doing some of this stuff out in drawing or other computer things, just to kind of get your head around it, has been really helpful. Getting input from stakeholders. So this is primarily our internal team, so we haven't had to go outside very often, but just even within our own team, getting feedback. What are the things that they want this system to do better? Then finding the best tools that are available, and not worrying about perfection. Does SmartSuite do everything we want to do? No, but it does a lot more than we ever had before. And the fact that it keeps growing, we haven't maxed out the capacity of what's available in SmartSuite, and that'll probably be a long time coming. So we're quite happy with what this tool that we've selected. Find partners. Other webinars have talked about that. That's critical. There's another one. There's one other colleague who really gets into this stuff, and they're who I work with to get more, testing and thinking it out loud. And then when we're ready to go wider, then we work out from there. But having at least one other person who can see the possibilities and is willing to do some of the work means that we'll be a little bit more polished when we go to the next circle of influence that we're trying to do. And then also make some quick, meaningful wins. Again, solve problems that the people are really having, and they're going to be willing to give the next idea a consideration. And then keep learning and teaching, and those go together. One of the best ways to teach or to learn something is to try and teach it to someone else, and that's certainly been my experience with this. And then also in this whole journey for me, prioritizing usefulness. While part of me gets excited about, oh, that's interesting, and wow, look at that AI application and this, that, or the other thing. That's interesting, but that's not going to be the same level of, that's not going to be as motivating to others as showing you how you can be useful, and how this tool can be useful. All right, a few of the quick technology lessons is, research options, but then pick one. There's part of me that I saw that commercial, or that YouTube thing about that next product, and that's great, but I'm committed to SmartSuite for the near future, not forever necessarily, but I know that I will miss the opportunity to be effective in this tool if I only dabble at it and keep dabbling in other things. Learn the basics, which I already talked about some before. And then again, pilot a real project. And some of the technology things is backup data, any critical data first. If you're going to play with stuff, SmartSuite's awesome that the templates provide dummy data to begin with at the real simple level. But when you're ready to implement, I still recommend make sure the data that you've got to appear in the original copy, then work with the next. That way you don't have to worry about if what you thought was going to be beautiful just deleted a bunch of stuff. You don't really have to worry because you've got the original set. Make mistakes, but keep learning. That I definitely have made a lot of mistakes. Prioritize Gitmo, which is good enough to move on. Again, the temptation can be to get all the bells and whistles together, make it look super nice and whatever. But particularly early on, now's the time to try and win people over, is to just show that it's useful, good enough, and then keep adding on. And then solicit integrated feedback into refinements and move on to the next project. Next steps. More automations, dashboards, integrations, documenting solution apps. Those are things that we need to do to keep improving what's going on in our team. So the end of this story, in my role, one of the things that came out of this was the recognition that the side work I was doing was significant and important enough that it's now an official part of my job. So there's kind of a promotion or a transformation of my work to include Center Technology. So that's my role. There are new projects to explore and more automations. I want to circle back and refine some of those things again. I want us to upgrade our system investment and integrate with other tools, but I've gone long, so let me pause if there's any questions with the remaining time.
Dave, tremendous. Not only are you a learner and have a great way of articulating those learnings to share to others who are at various stages, I'm sure, of their journey. It's not easy to evangelize any technology, be it a point solution or something that's potentially as abstract as SmartSuite and as a platform to build on. So kudos times a million. I'd love to hear questions from the group. We still have a really solid group here. I'd love to dig back while these questions come into that first learning slide. If you could click back there.
The systems learning or the big picture?
Yeah, big picture here, which these basically life learnings. Like this could be applied outside of technology to greater things in life. This concept of anticipating resistance, well, not an easy one. You've been doing this for a decade, 2+ now in the technology space in varying roles. This often is the most challenging, especially in higher education, where you don't know where you're going to encounter that. Any specific tips around how you make champions out of detractors, how you overcome, how you see around the corner?
Interesting thing about resistance is sometimes it is direct. Someone is saying, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have to learn a new thing. That's not as often. More often than not, it's this like invisible, just this systemic resistance to change by putting up roadblocks to trying something new or doing something different. So a lot of times early on, I wouldn't dismantle the old system. I would show that I could do the same thing in a new system and better. So like with Asana, we didn't stop Asana, burn that ship, and then start SmartSuite. We actually overlapped for a season. And so part of it was to demonstrate, if I could demonstrate in a better way of doing things, that went a long way of lowering resistance. And then also, quite frankly, doing the budgeting, that was a critical piece. Most of my team members were like, hey, sure, let's do this. But to get buy-in from the next level up by showing that we could actually save money and improve what our processes and our data stuff, that became like then someone else would have to come up with a reason why we shouldn't do it rather than why. So kind of stack the deck in your favor when you can with data.
I love that. Then on the next slide, you talk about sort of the reverse, which is finding a partner. We always talk about finding that internal champion, and that can be a colleague. It can be somebody who just wants to be supportive, doesn't necessarily roll up the sleeves. Any Any tips in terms of how you know you found that? Because people will get excited by what you show, but what
Yeah.
makes someone a true partner to you?
Yeah, part of it is just we're a small enough team that we can kind of see um who's doing that. So in my case, my one of my first partners, had two particular. One was a part-time data analytics person who that was their world. That's their world, and so they could recognize any improvements we were making would be beneficial. So they were sold on the because they already lived in the world of data. And then the new employer relations director that I work with, she recognized and inherited this Google spreadsheet. And so and she's trying to do a lot of work. So anything that could be automated or systematized, she was attracted to, and she's willing to roll up her sleeve. So while she may not read and listen to tech podcasts like I do, she cares enough about our interests overlapped, and she wanted to keep doing her job better and more efficiently. And she saw how technology could provide that, and I could partner with her. And if she became on board, then that became a evidence of the usefulness in one area, which then others gave credibility to the potential usefulness in their areas.
It's amazing. One of the coolest things we hear when folks are able to either get promoted formally or the work that they're doing is being acknowledged. So appreciate
Yeah,
you sharing that. That's like the ultimate win for us when it's able to
yeah,
power someone's
yeah,
personal
yeah.
um, up leveling, if you'll call it that.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. No, that's something rewarding. And I've always had a tech piece to the work I've done, which hasn't been tech. I went to school in Silicon Valley as an undergrad, so it was in the water, I think. And so I've always found a way to keep it part of what I do, both out of interest, but actually it's enabled me to be more effective in a lot of ways. And definitely SmartSuite is a new and no code, low code solutions has been the right, like I'd entertain, do I want to get into coding and learn that? But the commitment level is higher than what I was willing to do at this stage of my life. But this platform and these kind of platforms has been enough of a half step that I could use some of my system and tech acumen
Sure.
to actually make a difference at a professional level without having to go become a coder. So it's a
Right, right.
good
Invest largely in
split.
that. I love it. Perfect. Eric, we're coming up on time here, but a really poignant question from Eric. So, particularly for the tech averse crowd,
Yep.
when onboarding colleagues to the SmartSuite ecosystem, did you work with people individually to get them acquainted, kind of lead more
I
communal training
More
style webinars?
communal. What I did with
Yeah.
more communal, and I actually created an onboarding um, project, and some of the steps were watch this SmartSuite video. So begin, because so much of that was already in place. I could curate rather than so
Right.
they didn't have to watch five, but two short ones could be enough to kind of wet their whistle. And then so I created like an onboarding, step-by-step process. Not all of them followed it through. Some did, some were, but enough of it went forward that we're using it. And then I was available as needed, and that was often informal. Hey, can you show me this, show me that, and so it was supplemented with some additional over-the-shoulder coaching, but it wasn't. I didn't actually have to spend a lot of time beyond the doing the curating of resources.
That's great. And Eric also mentioned in there the permissioning capability in SmartSuite certainly is probably helps with that as well to allow
Yeah,
people to not be overwhelmed by seeing all, and you can get them
right,
focused on. Yeah.
right. That I had, yeah, for sure.
Rapid fire last two as we're a minute over time, but important ones. Number one, your favorite feature or function in SmartSuite? Love
Yeah,
to hear
yeah.
it.
Yeah, so probably I think the record views in some ways is the I think just the very fact that at the most basic level, when you're looking at information, it's attractive, it's organizable, and it works for me and and it feels like it works for most users. So I think just the basic record view, feeling more like a, a well-organized piece of paper rather than, you know, Windows 98 data
Mm-hmm.
list. So yeah.
Love it. And then
And
wish
then
list. Go ahead, sorry.
yeah, so there's several other ones in my favorite elements, but that was the top one. And then wish list is, I suspect the capabilities are there, but I still haven't learned it. But some of our automation, the next automation unicorn for us is to figure out how to create a system so that non full members to SmartSuite can, like alumni, they could see their data and only their data and update it. But and us be able to do that, not just with a form, but for us, and maybe we can do it for, but somehow to be able to periodically or have on our website a way for people to be able to see their data and update it without us having to be involved. So that may be more of a cognitive wish list rather than a technological barrier. But at this point, that's one of those things I'm wanting to tackle next.
Interesting. So to be able to credential in and just see the info that's important to
Right.
them.
So
Yeah.
forget, and I've seen some of the partner videos where, some of the like softer, some of the other ones that create like windows to your data, like another layer, and that you can then be selective about it. But I'd love to find a way to do it without having to go to a third party, so that again, people can't see everyone's data, but if we send them an automated link, they can see their data and then update it, and have that automatically be updated rather than just to use a form. Forms are great.
Yeah.
Forms are a great step in the right direction, but
Sure.
but would love to have it even more self-serve.
Yeah. Very, very good. Well, our product team is always listening. We joke that our devs have big ears and bigger brains. So
Yeah, I
they're,
completely
I'm
agree.
sure, synthesizing this. Yeah.
All right.
Again, a treat. Always a treat, Dave. Thank you
Well, thank
for
you. Yeah,
investing
thanks for the
time
chance.
here.
Thanks for the chance. And I'm in and
Absolutely.
out of the community group. Hopefully, see people out there. I'm happy to answer questions or engage more if there's any of the stuff I've talked about. Has triggered something. Let me know. I'm happy to interact with you. I enjoy this stuff as well as it being part of my job. So thanks.
Very good. All right, everyone. Well, okay, connect with Dave. Thanks for all of you for the bonus time here
Yeah.
in investing this. And there we go.
All right.
All right. Continuing on this education series. Enjoy the rest of your days. Take care.
You too. Take care. Thanks.
Bye.